to the Divorce Support Club podcast.
Hello everybody, good afternoon and welcome to the November's session that we're having today with Claire Black, and the focus today is going to be on tensions that arise around the festive period, and of course that can be including relationship issues with children, issues with relatives. So we hope that there'll be lots of hints and tips that you can take away from this session, and please do feel free to raise any questions. Just to remind you that I'm Lauren Preedy, the head of the relationships team, and I specialise in divorce and financial matters. And we're joined by Claire Black, who we work with to provide extra services for our clients. And I'll let Claire introduce herself more fully. And welcome to today's session, everybody.
Thank you very much, Lauren. So yes, hi everybody, I'm Claire Black and I'm a breakup and divorce coach. I'm working with Ian Walker to provide a friendly, informative and informal space for clients going through separation and divorce to get information, ask questions in a safe and confidential environment. I'll start off again with who I am. So I'm a breakup and divorce coach, a master NLP practitioner. I'm a former lawyer. I'm also the divorced mum of 2 teenage boys. I have also been a second wife, a stepmom, and I've written a book which is called Breakup from Crisis to Confidence. The purpose of the DSE, as I said before, is to help you to move through your divorce with calm and with confidence. And I have kind of 7 pillars, I suppose, that I help my clients with. I help them to concentrate on you rather than focusing on your ex, to become calm, to get clarity, to focus on what you can control rather than what you can't, to see options and choices, to communicate more effectively, and also then to create a vibrant future that you're excited to live. So let's talk about Christmas. I know that Christmas can be a really, really challenging time for anybody who's separated or divorced. The media doesn't help. It bombards us with these images of perfect families, smiley children, amazing Christmas lunches. But for those of us who are going through a separation or divorce, it isn't always like that. Perhaps you have feelings of being worried, being anxious, depressed. You're not sure what arrangements are for your children yet. You're perhaps afraid of feeling lonely on Christmas Day, and it can be really, really challenging. And I remember feeling very anxious about Christmas the first time I had to spend it without my children, and also for the first couple of years after that. And this year, actually, I'm also spending Christmas on my own for the first time in quite a few years. And I've used all the strategies that I'm going to talk about later myself, so I know that they work. Ultimately, I know that I have a choice. I could let it get me down, or I could find new ways to enjoy my time over Christmas. And I'm going to share with you some tips and questions that you can ask yourself that will help you as you go into the festive season, whether you're spending time with your ex or not, whether you're planning on time alone or time with others. I hope these questions will help you to reframe it and perhaps shift your perspective. And I'll share some client stories and things along the way as well. So ultimately, my key message is, although Christmas might be different once you're divorced or while you're going through a divorce, and those changes can be challenging and painful, the truth is, whatever the reality is, you always have choice. So the first thing for me is always to acknowledge how you feel. And I find this emotions wheel really, really useful. Paul McKenna describes your emotions as being a bit like messengers who knock on the door. If you don't answer the door, they just knock louder and louder and louder, and eventually they burst their way in. So it's really important to look at how you feel, acknowledge your feelings, and be kind to yourself about them. I think it's always really good to name your feelings because it takes away some of their power. So if you notice that you feel sad or angry or frustrated or afraid, whatever that feeling is, acknowledge it, notice it, and accept that you feel that way. You could perhaps write down how you feel. You could journal about it. You could stand in front of a mirror and state how you feel to yourself. And it's a really good question to ask, how strong are those feelings out of 10? Are you feeling them at a 2 or a 5 or a 10? Just notice how they rise and fall, because they never stay the same. Personally, my feelings around Christmas by myself, slightly anxious, a bit afraid of feeling lonely when I wake up on my own on Christmas Day, or if I don't have things to distract myself. Perhaps your feelings are something entirely different. But whatever it is you feel, know that it's okay to feel that way and be kind to yourself. So what can we do about those feelings? So first of all, ride the wave. So these feelings are always transitory. They never stay forever. They come and they go. And I like to think of them as being a bit like waves. So if you're imagining yourself as like a surfer out on the sea, and you can see a wave of emotion perhaps coming towards you, imagine yourself on your board. Turn your board to travel with the wave. So make yourself comfortable, lie down if you need to, sit in a comfy chair, stop your car, whatever it is. And imagine that you turn your board and you catch that wave and you ride it towards the sea, towards the shore. And that, just let that wave wash over you. When you imagine yourself landing back on the shore, when it kind of feels like it's subsiding a bit, just imagine yourself again sitting on the sand, feeling the sun perhaps warming your back, knowing that you can put a towel around your shoulders and that you're safe again. You're no longer in that sea. And then shake it off. So shake your whole body off to get rid of those feelings and know that you've moved through them. The next thing is probably a practical thing. And I always say to people, plan ahead. And I think Lauren will probably have something to add to this later in legal perspective. So I'll keep this kind of brief. Certainty matters. So plan, plan, plan. If you haven't already got your Christmas plans, especially if your children in place now, then start. If it's going to be tricky, you'll then have time to take advice. You'll have time to talk to your lawyer, hopefully, if need be. But be clear on what you would like. Keep your communication factual rather than emotional. One way perhaps to take back your power might be to put a proposal forward to your ex for them to comment on, and it means you're not on the back foot. I always try to do that and put my proposal to get there first. Once you know what's happening, then you can plan too for your time on your own as well as your time with the children. And I'll have lots of suggestions about that later. Also plan your presents. So if you can agree what to buy your children, then that's fantastic. If you can't and you need to buy separately, then that's also okay. I did hear a story the other day about a lady who her ex-husband asked her for a list of things that the children wanted for Christmas. So she collected all the ideas and sent him this list, and he bought every single item on the list. So that might be something to watch out for. If your ex has form for being a little bit difficult or challenging, then maybe only give them half of the presents that have been suggested by your children so that you're not caught out in that way. And then it's all about changing how you feel. So some questions for you to ponder. The first question that I always ask people is, what won't you miss? So ask yourself, if there was one good thing about this, what would it be? What am I really not going to miss this Christmas? Perhaps you no longer have to put up with your father-in-law drinking too much whiskey and being really argumentative. Perhaps you don't have to put up with eating sprouts anymore. Your ex-husband loves them and you detest them. Or perhaps you don't want to eat turkey. You can do exactly what you want. You don't have to conform to those things that irritated you before. I remember one client saying to me that this Christmas she could make much more mess, more noise, she could have more fun. Her ex-husband wasn't going to be going around the lounge after each present was unwrapped with a black bin bag, collecting up all the wrapping paper and all the sellotape. Or perhaps your ex always wanted to watch the Queen's speech on the dot of 3 o'clock and you'd rather watch it later or not at all. Now you can do those things. Then focus on what you can do rather than what you can't. It's really easy to focus on what you can't do and kind of sink into feeling low. So instead, flip it around, ask what you can do. So I remember working with a client last year who came to a session sort of late November, really upset and worried that her son was going to be with his dad for the first time at Christmas. And she spent the first 10 minutes of the session crying and saying that she knew she was going to be at home on her own for Christmas and she knew it was going to be really miserable. So I asked her what she could do this year that she wouldn't be able to do if her son was with her. And it took her by surprise a little bit. And she thought for a moment and she immediately said, do you know what? I've always wanted to join in the Boxing Day ride from the local stables. It goes along the beach and they do it every year. And I've often watched them and thought, gosh, wouldn't that be amazing to do? But since she's had her son, she hadn't been able to, that hadn't been possible. So she went away from our session and booked herself in. And that's what she did on Boxing Day. She'd been invited to her friends for Christmas Day, and she also knew that she and her husband would be great fun, that she'd be able to have a few drinks, she'd be able to stay over. So she decided that she would accept the invitation, and her Christmas suddenly looked a bit different. Remember as well that you always have choice. And if you've been to the DSC before, you know that I talk a lot about choice. So if you're dreading Christmas, first ask yourself, what is it that I'm most dreading? Is it waking up by yourself? Is it spending the day on your own? Is it missing the children? Or is it something else? Just be honest with yourself. And then once you know what that worst part is, you can start to think about what choices you have to overcome it. So even if you're going to be on your own at Christmas, you can make a choice between staying in bed, eating crisps with a bottle of something bubbly perhaps, or you could choose to eat your favourite meal. A friend of mine last year was on her own for Christmas and she decided she didn't want to do anything other than eat baked beans, so that's what she had for lunch. You could totally break with any traditions. You could take your dog out for a long walk. You could watch your favourite movies. You have choices around what you do with that time. If you don't want to be on your own, what friends could you talk to see what other choices you might have? So this year I've made some choices. I am going to friends for Christmas Day, and I'm going to watch a rugby match on Boxing Day, and going back to somebody else's house for a party. So you can make choices about exactly what you do with your time. Creating new traditions. So Christmas is full of traditions, weird, wonderful traditions, and perhaps you've always wanted to introduce a new one. Or maybe there's something that your family used to do that you haven't been able to do for the last few years. Or perhaps your ex had traditions that you didn't really enjoy or look forward to. It means that you can create new ones. You don't have to do things the way you've always done them anymore. You could introduce something totally different. You could change your routine around. And by doing something different, you avoid comparing to Christmas past. And you might even create a tradition that you really love and you want to keep going with. Another really good question to ask might be, what's the best gift I could give myself this Christmas? So on a piece of paper, perhaps jot down any ideas you might have, however crazy or bonkers they might seem, and then think about how you might be able to do some of those things. Perhaps it's the gift of time to read that new novel you've been waiting for, or going for a very long walk in the countryside. You can do whatever you want and give yourself whatever gift it is that would mean most to you. Let's think for a moment about children. So I've said this before, your children will follow your lead. So if your children aren't with you for parts of the holidays, how can you focus onto the time that you do have together rather than on the time that you don't? And your children will take their cue from you. So if you're down and negative, they will be as well. If you're angry and resentful, they're likely to feel conflicted and stressed. So when you're upbeat and you plan to do things that you'll all enjoy in your time together, they'll do the same, and that will become their norm. So perhaps you could get ideas from them about things that they'd like to do, perhaps traditions they'd like to start, and focus on putting in your diary a few of those things that you'll all enjoy together. And then even if you don't have your children on Christmas Day, remind yourself Christmas Day is just one day out of 365, and you can hold Christmas Day whenever you want. So this year I'm having Christmas Day on December the 28th at my brother's house with my family, my parents, my brother and his daughter. We're going to have a full-on Christmas just on a different day. And the brilliant thing about it is the 28th of December, so the shops are open. So if there's something that we have forgotten, we can actually go and get it. And last week I asked my son, he's 15 now, how he feels about Christmas. And he said, it's really great, Mum. We have 2 Christmases and it's really quite exciting. So when you frame your reality positively, your children will follow your example. If you are struggling, perhaps with the time your children will be with your ex-partner over the holidays, I suggest putting yourself in their shoes and really putting yourself in them. So close your eyes, imagine that you are your child or your children. You're seeing, hearing and experiencing things from their perspective. And this can be quite challenging, but it's really worth doing. And then ask yourself, how do I feel? What do I want? And what message would I give my mum or my dad about Christmas? And just jot down any ideas that come to mind. Most children just want to be able to see both their parents, have fun with both their parents, and be free to love them both. And when you put yourself in your children's shoes, you're putting your children's interests right at the top. No child wants to see their parents arguing over where they spend Christmas Day. In the long run, they'll probably remember that arguing for years after they've forgotten which house they were actually in. And then if you have to spend time with your ex over Christmas, I know that some families get together on Christmas Day, take a step back from the emotion around the divorce. Try to put your differences aside over Christmas. If you're struggling, make a conscious decision to respond rather than react. Make a conscious decision to take a really deep breath if something happens that irritates or causes those emotions to rise. Breathe and pause. Slow down your reactions. Maybe even take a break from the room. Go and be somewhere else for 10-15 minutes. Because although you can't control your ex, their behaviours, their reactions, you can control your own, and you can take the heat out of the situation from your side. And lastly, if you are worried about seeing your ex or spending time with them at Christmas, you can always use your imagination to help you. And those of you who've been to the DSC before know that this is one of my favourite strategies. Your brain doesn't know the difference between what you imagine and what you remember. So you can prepare for seeing or spending time with your ex-partner by becoming the Steven Spielberg of your own mind and imagining the scene in your mind with you watching it on a big screen. So you see yourself in a movie, behaving exactly as you would want, perhaps zipping yourself up into a Teflon suit, perhaps being very composed, saying exactly what you need to say, being calm, being confident, and maybe even rehearsing what you want to say out loud. So you watch your scene through, you rewind it, and you watch it again, but you make it bigger. You make the colours brighter, you make the sound louder, and feel yourself in that scene so that you're no longer watching, you've become part of it. And then keep repeating that in your mind until you feel in control of it and that you've given your very best performance. And you could even practice this in front of a mirror if you wanted to say the words out loud. Because once you know what you want to say, how you want to feel, how you want to act, when you actually come to do it in real life, your brain will remember your mind movie and it will be much more clear about what it wants you to do and how well it wants you to behave. So I think my big message here is it takes as much energy to worry and stress and be concerned about Christmas as it does to plan for how to make it better and to plan for events that are going to make you happy. So the key is to shift your focus, stop worrying about Christmas Day and concentrate on what you can do instead to make the holidays as good as they possibly can be. And it may not be perfect. You may not get it quite right this year. It may not be exactly as you want, but you can make the best of it and you can make it as free from stress as you possibly can for yourself. And you never know, you might actually create a tradition that you really love and you want to keep repeating. I think I'd like to ask Lauren if there's anything you want to add in terms of from a legal perspective to any of that. I'm aware that was all sort of very much from the emotional sort of side.
Yeah, thanks, Claire. There's a few kind of, I was scribbling a few things to talk about. I think first of all, if I could pick up the bit that you're saying, you use the word a few times about practice. I think that's really important for us to talk about that now again, to say that these things do take practice, and we've said before in a few of the other sessions that we've done that some of these techniques require you to keep on doing them. So like with the Spielberg film that you were just talking about, that you need to keep on doing these things to help yourself to get better at it and for your brain to remember the patterns and things.
That's right. And it, the first time is always going to be the hardest. So it would never be easy the first time round, but it's about keeping on making those neural pathways in your brain.
So going back to the planning ahead, and I think you're absolutely right, Claire, that is the bit that often time runs away with us. People are working, they've got stresses with children, we've got school stresses, we've got all the stresses that we've had this year with COVID restrictions, and in my experience at the moment, people are feeling even more tense perhaps about Christmas because of course it's opened up again this year, whereas last year we couldn't see who we wanted to see necessarily. The first thing I think that's important for people to remember is that a lot of legal practices, including ours and a lot of other services, shut over the Christmas period. So I think that if there is any questions and support that people need from me, then they need to make sure that they do plan ahead for that, because although we are there in emergencies, of course, the office is generally going to be shut over that period. And I think to not be afraid to raise the issues with me now if there are concerns. And I can envisage in a lot of people's situations, and I have to deal with it at all times of the year, but also particularly at this time, if there's concerns about money and if there is, whatever stage of the separation you may be at, there may be concerns about money and what is going to be happening. So that's something to think about if you have any of those issues, to make sure that we do talk about it.
It's always best to ask your questions.
Yeah,
if you've got any questions, however silly you might think they are, you know, that you need to ask your lawyer or your financial advisor or your coach or your therapist, ask them, please do.
Yeah, and also, of course, child arrangements, which you touched on, and planning and proposing. And again, everybody's scenarios, as we know, are different, and children are different ages. So it's good, again, to talk to me about that if there are concerns that you have about it. And the bit that linked to that on your slide, Claire, was about the media. And again, it's, I think, not just the media, as in the media that's presented to us in the way you said, but also social media and how other people are presenting can also cause a lot of tensions for people at Christmas. So again, linking to the boundaries, to think about what you do and don't want to see, and what might be helpful for you, and to not be afraid to just switch it all off if that's the best thing.
Absolutely. I talk about torture by social media. You know, so I always advise my clients, don't follow your ex on social media, don't look at what they're doing, especially around Christmas, when you've got perhaps your friends are posting lots of wonderful nuclear family pictures, and I know that can be really painful when you're going through a divorce. So if you can put your own boundaries in place to protect yourself, that's brilliant, because you can't stop other people from posting whatever it is they want to post, but you can take charge of what you see, and what you look at and how you respond to it. So yeah, I would suggest that perhaps coming off Facebook for the week or two before Christmas is a really good idea if you know that it's going to upset you.
I saw a really interesting visual image the other day, which was somebody looking through a hole in the wall and somebody looking over the wall. And the person looking through the hole in the wall thought it was raining. But the person looking over the top can see that it's sunshine and somebody's watering a flower.
Yes. So the different perspectives, you know, how, you know, a miracle, I read the other day, a miracle can be as wonderful as a change in perspective. And I think that's what that's about, isn't it? It's, you know, if you're looking through the tiny hole and you think it's raining, you're going to have a whole different view of what's happening the other side of that wall to the person who's able to look over the top. And none of us know what anybody else is going through. We don't know what other people's perspectives are. But if we can sort of take control of our own boundaries, to take charge and take care with our own perspectives, then that can only help ourselves.
And from a legal perspective, I always say to people to not speculate. We lawyers love certainty sometimes, and a lot of the time you can't get certainty, but letting your mind run away with speculating about things that might happen, or what will happen if there is court proceedings, some of whatever kind in place, then of course you tend to speculate. It's a human nature to do that, but to try to not do that, and to speak to me if there are any concerns in those areas. The other thing as well, and it sounds a bit dramatic, but I think it's important to mention over the Christmas period as well, is if there have been any kind of issues of domestic abuse in people's relationships, that you may feel at that time of year that there is less support about it if your professional advisors' offices are shut, but there is always support that you can get, and to reach out to me if you think that you may need support over that time, and I can signpost you in the best places to go. And the only other thing that I had on my little note as we were talking, Claire, is, could you explain for people that may not have joined us before, the reframing and what that means? Because I think that that's really important.
Yeah, sure. So I use a lot of reframing, because the way that you look at something really affects how you feel about it. So a bit like your analogy of looking through the small hole or looking over the top of the wall, you know, how you look at something will change your feelings around it. Now, we can't change what has happened. We can't change what someone else says or does. But what we can do is perhaps change the angle that we look at it from. So I quite often ask my clients to stand in a different place in the room, or imagine that they are a different person, or that they're a fly on the wall, for example, just to look at a situation from a different perspective. Sometimes it's useful to look at it, for example, imagine what's happening as a scene in a play, and you're in the balcony watching it. If you were directing it, what would you want to happen next? And it helps to take a step back. But when you reframe, you kind of flip things around. So one good example of a reframing question might be, what can I do now that I couldn't do before? So you're focusing on what you can do. You're focusing on where your power is, rather than focusing on the negative stuff. Because if you focus on the negative stuff, you end up going down this kind of downward rabbit hole spiral.
You're talking about those, answering those questions for yourself,
yes.
And also taking practical actions that works together, presumably to assist with that process.
Yes, exactly, and can very much change how you feel. Even simple things can reframe how you feel. So, for example, you get up in the morning and you don't feel great, you feel a bit low. Now you've got a choice at that point. You can choose to put on clothes, for example, that reflect how you feel. So, you know, an old tracksuit that's a bit sort of manky and, you know, you don't really like it, but it kind of reflects how you feel. Or you could choose to put on clothes that reflect how you want to feel. And you could put on something that helps you to feel a bit better, something in a bright colour, something in your favourite colour, whatever it is, something that gives you a bit of a lift. And it just reframes the day from that point onwards. So reframing is all about thinking, how am I looking at this now? And how could I look at this differently that would help me to feel differently about it?
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. And the other thing is, I loved the wheel of emotions, because I think that I struggle with some of the words on there, because it's not things I feel comfortable either sort of thinking I may feel like that, or actually some of them are really difficult concepts to think about. But again, if you make yourself think about them and accept things, then I suppose it's the case of not kind of pushing it under the carpet and hoping it goes away. And I very much hope that our listeners understand that with the legal side of things, but also the work that you do, these things work in combination to assist through what you're going through. And please do feel free to ask us any questions about anything we've talked about. These sessions are all going to start linking up with each other, and we're going to start revisiting things to help you through the situation you're going through. And as we usually say at I think we're coming to the end of the session now. Please do let us know if you have any questions, and if you can email one of us if you want to, or in these sessions you are confidentially able to send comments to the panel, and we're absolutely happy to answer things off the cuff. Or if you want to go and think about things and then let us know, we can address them at the next session. We want this to be flexible to meet people's needs as best as possible, and any feedback is much appreciated.
Absolutely. There is actually a question that's popped up in the Q&A, Lauren. So it says, there's a couple, another one's just come in. So I'm excited for Christmas, but I'm anxious and worried about how my child might feel about having a very different Christmas to normal. So I think this is a really normal kind of feeling to have, that worrying about how your children are going to react to this very different Christmas this year. The big thing, I think, is how you frame it to them. So highlight to them the good stuff that you're going to do, highlight to them the time that you're going to spend with them, start planning with them for some of those times, talk to them about what they would like to do, what they'd like to achieve, and try not to make assumptions. And it's very easy to assume that because something is different, the children are really going to hate it and they're really not going to enjoy it. But actually that might not be true. There might be aspects of a different Christmas that they prefer. There might be aspects that they want to continue onwards. I think, if you are, depending obviously on how old they are, if you're honest about what's happening, if you present things in the most positive light that you can, and highlight for them what they can do now that they couldn't do before, perhaps, and where the upsides are for them, then they will follow your lead. And my children, for example, alternate Christmases at different houses is just completely the norm now. They don't even think about it, and their only question is, which house are we at this year? They don't really mind either way these days, because it's been so many years.
And the other thing in my experience, personally and with clients, is the whole where does Father Christmas visit, which can cause tensions it may sound like a small thing to some people, but actually it can be a really massive thing to have to deal with that.
Yeah.
So again, to think about these things in advance and not leave it till the last minute.
Yes, so that you can prepare yourself.
The next question that's popped up that I can see there, Claire, is mixtures of emotions, and is that normal, and does it get easier?
Oh wow, so yes, a total mixture of emotions is completely normal. A mixture all at once, a mixture in 5 minutes, a mixture in an hour, all completely and totally normal. It's all kind of subconscious stuff that's whirling around your head, and it's really normal to feel okay about it 1 minute, not okay about it the next minute. Something might happen to set it off. The big thing, I think, is to be very aware of those emotions, perhaps become aware of what triggers them. Remember that they are transitory. They come and they go, and they don't stay forever. And perhaps try using that surfing technique that I talked about earlier. But yes, in short, it's really normal to have very mixed emotions, and even conflicting ones. There might be parts of Christmas you're looking forward to and parts that you're not, and that's also normal and okay.
The other thing I find comes up is if there are court proceedings in place, there can be that either divorce, financial, or children. There can be that kind of feeling of guilt that certain things may appear to contradict each other. Like, you're trying to be kind on one hand in respect of Christmas, but actually there might be a court process which doesn't seem to sit hand in hand with that. You're perfectly entitled to take legal advice. You're perfectly entitled to take advice on what is best for you and your family. But then on the other hand, there has to be these small moments of reality of dealing with everyday life with the children. And I suppose my message would be to not feel guilty about that, and also to not feel guilty about having fun. Even if you're in the middle of a difficult process, that you're still allowed to give yourself that time out to have that fun with yourself and your children.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that, some people find that very quite a challenging thing to realize, because and I absolutely agree with you. It's okay to laugh, it's okay to have a bit of fun, it's okay to enjoy the time when the children aren't with you as well as the time that they are.
I've just had another one come in about whether I would recommend having less contact with the partner about legal issues on the build up to Christmas. That's a really difficult question to answer, on the basis that I think that probably depends on, first of all, whether they've got a solicitor that can assist with communications if that is necessary, where you are in the process, and whether or not there is deadlines that are coming up. But generally speaking, there is that time around that period where, as I said, professionals are shut, the court is shut, and actually you're allowed some downtime and to switch your brain off from it. The only thing that my only legal message would be is that I'm always hot on making sure that deadlines aren't missed, and it's important usually to not miss them. There are lots of exceptions to that. So you need to talk about that with me or the solicitor at the firm to make sure that you understand any implications of things. But for instance, it might be like, I've got a case at the moment, and the court hearing in relation to financial matters isn't until March, and there's a bit of information that's missing in respect of a pension, but actually that doesn't matter at the moment. So actually there probably doesn't need to be any communications about that in the run up to Christmas, because it's actually not going to have an impact on anything. So I suppose it very much depends upon what the situation is, and please make sure you ask about it. And again, I've got another case at the moment where the person has decided they're just going to put absolutely everything on hold for 3 months because they actually don't feel now is the time that they can continue to do that because of the circumstances that have arisen with COVID restrictions and schooling. And again, my advice has been that there isn't going to be any repercussions of that, and it can be a personal choice about the speed and how things are dealt with. So you must feel free to speak openly about that and ask the questions.
To add to that, if you and your ex-partner are on reasonable terms, there's nothing to stop you agreeing that although you need to spend some time together over Christmas, perhaps even if it's just moving the children from one house to the other, you can agree that you won't mention the divorce over Christmas. Perhaps you have a kind of hiatus from it and an amnesty on it over Christmas. So you can put boundaries in place between you as well around what you will and won't bring to the table at this time of year.
Yeah. No, thank you very much, Claire. That was really good to hear about those issues and things that could come up, so that people can help plan and prepare. And I think that would kind of be my main message from today's session as well, is to make sure you do plan ahead.
Yeah. So planning ahead legally, but also planning ahead emotionally. Being aware of what's probably going to come up for you and thinking about how you're going to deal with it in advance is only going to be helpful. Before we go, we should probably say our next meeting is, I think it's on Tuesday the 14th of December at 1 o'clock. We will talk about we'll let you know what we're going to talk about then. But if anybody has any suggestions or anything burning that they would really like us to cover that we haven't covered, please do let us know, either by email to myself or to Lauren.
And from a legal perspective, we're going to touch a bit more on financial matters that might be important.
Yeah. Well, brilliant.
Yes, thank you everybody for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you very much, everyone.